is the third of a 4-part lecture series, organised by the local branch of Tangata Tiriti Aotearoa. And the purpose of these lectures is to inform and activate Tangata Tiriti, those of us in New Zealand who are not Māori. And it's to discuss how we can honour Te Tiriti today. The founding document. Have I lost my mic? Yes. There's not much I can do about it. The founding document of our nation. We have an exciting panel of speakers tonight, all discussing the kaupapa, what does honouring Te Tiriti look like? They are Martin Williams, a lawyer and Hawke's Bay Regional Council councillor, Kirsty Fong, a Te Tiriti facilitator and member of Asian supporting Tino Rangatiratanga, and local treaty educator Gwyn John. So we'll start with the personal introductions. Can I get you to kick off, Martin?
Yeah, tēnā koe Hayley, tēnā koutou katoa, tēnā koe ita kai karakia, Nick, tuku whakamoe-ti tēnā koe. Ka nui te mihi mana hau ki a koutou, kua tai mai ki tēnei wānanga i te kaupapa i te tiriti o Waitangi, i te wā kei mua. Welcome everyone to this hui to discuss what honouring the Treaty of Waitangi to Tiriti really looks like. I just wanted to start by introducing myself through what I would call my whakapapa to the kaupapa of this evening's hui. And it all started for me in law school, although I was familiar with the fact growing up that my tupuna Henry and William were associated with the mission up in Paihia in the 1820s. And that Henry, who I'll come back to, had some involvement with translating Te Tiriti. In my first law lecture in 1992, I was completely sat on my haunches when the law lecturer told 300 budding law students, including me, that Henry had deliberately mistranslated the treaty in exchange for land. And I was stunned. This was completely at odds with what I understood to be the reality of the situation. And it set me on a life quest, if you like, to actually get to the bottom of that and to correct that misconception of history, not for the mana of my family, but for the mana and integrity of Te Tiriti itself. Now, I actually whakapapa to Henry's younger brother, his taina William. He's my great-great-great-grandfather. He was a bishop here in Waiapu from the 1860s. Before that, he helped Henry out at the mission in Paihia from 1826. So he set up his own mission in Tūranganui, Akiwa, Gisborne. Henry, returning to him, was a retired naval lieutenant at the age of 23. He joined when he was 14, and he fought in the Napoleonic Wars. He was actually stoking guns, and so he was no sort of shrinking violet or timid soul. But the Church Missionary Society, which he later became a member of and which he represented in Paihia, was founded in the tradition of John Wesley, and in turn William Wilberforce, instrumental in the abolition of slavery. And two figures central to that movement acquired very prominent positions in the UK Colonial Office in the 1830s. In terms of briefing, ultimately Governor Hobson and British resident James Busby, who you might have heard of, as to the terms of what is now known as Te Tiriti. Henry, for his part, in late 1839, this is quite an interesting backstory, was witnessing firsthand, picture late 1839, he's down in the lower South Island, he's in the lower North Island, upper South Island, and he's witnessing firsthand mass appropriations or purchases by Edward Wakefield and the New Zealand Company of Land. And he was said to be absolutely infuriated by that after his decades of missionary work. And I take this from a book which I highly commend, Jay Ruka's Hui Come Home, where he describes Henry as the linchpin of the entire treaty process. Now picture this, on 5 December 1839, after discussing the situation with Te Rauparaha, he legs it, he walks from Kapiti to Tauranga and then gets on a boat up to Paihia, where he arrives on 18 January. About 2.5 weeks later, on the 4th of February at 4 o'clock, he writes, Henry was summoned by Governor Hobson to draft what we now know as Te Tiriti, working from 4 documents that were later assembled, I think, between the 5th and the 6th of February to create the so-called English version. And I take that from another epic tomb, which I will be drawing on tonight, and some of you may have read Dr. Ned Fletcher's incredible text, the English version, or the English text of the Treaty of Waitangi. Now, what? I've already been 5. I'll get to the point. I'll try to. But look, I can't share and be with you tonight unless I unpack the story a little bit. What the rangatira signed there was Te Tiriti, and it wasn't the English version. And he was not only left to translate that document, but to explain to Māori what it meant and to persuade them to sign for their protection. He described it in this book as an act of love. That he saw the treaty as the Magna Carta of the Māori people, and through that they would cede kawanatanga, which I'll come back to, a form of governance, and in return they would retain their full rights as chiefs by guarantee. Now, there was no trick in any of this, and Dr. Fletcher explains that it was actually a very faithful reflection of the instructions from the Crown through Governor Hobson. And I call, to finish, can I say this, I call, by introduction, I call Henry here as a witness as to the Crown's intentions of that day, to the honourable intent of Te Tiriti, and to the fact that Te Tiriti, as signed and translated, faithfully reflects the Crown's intentions and Henry's instructions. And my key message is that if we do honour to the kaupapa of this hui, Te Tiriti in the way it was intended, there's not only great hope for the future of this nation, but a place for everyone to stand. Tangata whenua and tangata tiriti together. Thank you. Kia ora.
Kia ora. Go on. Why? No, you go.
Hello.
Hello.
Kia ora. Tēnā rā tātou katoa. Kia ora everybody. That's quite a big act to follow. There's a lot of stuff there. I won't be that long. Just acknowledgement, thank you Nick for opening the space, and to the committee for your work in making this happen. Ngamihi hoki ki te mana whenua o tēnei rohe. Kei te no ngā iwi ngauri o ngā he uri ahau mo ngā iwi Pākehā hau, engari whānau mai o tipu ake au kei raru tēnei te maru o Matarua hau. Wainganui te manaakitanga o Ngāti Kahungunu ki ahiriri ki Hiratanga hoki, no reira ko tēnei te mihi kia koutou te mana whenua. Thank you for opening up this space. It's awesome to be here. Having grown up on the other side of Matarua hau, as my backyard, literally on Burns Road, that was my backyard, and I'm a 70s generation kid who grew up playing around the wharf area, the bamboo area of Battery Road. So this is, it's really cool to be here. My ancestors arrived here from my mum's side in the 1840s as part of the New Zealand Company movement, for those of you who know about the New Zealand Company. And my dad was born in the UK. So I grew up, like most of us who go to school here, with absolutely no clue about the history of this country. Learned all about Victorian England, some world wars that happened, lots of famous people in other parts of the world, but very little about our own history. So as I moved into my adult life and started working in sort of youth work areas, one of the challenges that was issued to those of us who were Pākehā working in this space, often working with whānau Māori, rangatahi Māori, we used to call them at-risk young people in those days, was to, if we're Pākehā working with Māori families, to at least have an understanding of the history of the country, what it is to be Māori, and the Māori language. And at that point, in my early 20s, I was like, oh yeah, that's a good idea. Never thought of that, literally never thought of that. So came home and went out to Hawke's Bay Polytechnic, where I was incredibly privileged to be, to learn amongst some amazing people in the 90s at Hawke's Bay Polytech. began a journey which I thought was about learning te reo, but actually it was about learning about our history and learning about the process of colonisation that happened here that we were never told about. And Ngamihi Kia Koe Whaia, Miriama, Moana Jackson, Annette spent quite a lot of time with us there teaching us about the history, so I was really privileged and to be able to learn about the story in that context. And at that time it was fiscal envelope hui. Remember the fiscal envelope hui? So we all jumped on the bus and went out to Omahu to protest about the fiscal envelope hui. And that was the beginning of me recognising the importance of taking a stand in this. And for me as Pākehā, now that I know this information, I can't unknow it, so what am I going to do about it? So from that point, and at that time, I don't know if you remember around that time, the Tino Rangatiratanga flag was kind of considered a bit of a terrorist flag. People were terrified by it. There was this kind of like fear of, Māori are going to send us down to the wharf and get on the boat and we're going to have to go back to England. And I recall a moment standing there on the ātea at Marae, at Omahu, and some of the guys, one of the guys walked past, I'm sure they did this intentionally, and they were just laughing in the corner, and handed me this massive bamboo pole with the Tino Rangatiratanga flag standing, flying on it. So here's me, this little white girl, on the Marae at Omahu holding the Tino Rangatiratanga flag. And that was my moment where I was like, okay, this is real. What am I going to do? And that led me into, okay, so for me, my responsibility is, in part, to make sure that our people are educated about this. Because so many of us don't learn about te tiriti, we don't know about our history. So my responsibility was to make sure that I did everything that I could to make sure that others who are Pākehā, who are tauiwi, who haven't learn about the history of colonisation, that we learn about it, that we know about it, and that we take action to do something about addressing the injustices. So that's how I got involved in this mahi, and I've been doing the mahi on and off in various different spaces and places. Just come back from Palmerston now. Spent a couple of days down there doing a workshop. And it's a real privilege to be in this space, and it's really important mahi, because like I am really astounded at 20 years later, 30 years later actually, 40 years later, the decades kind of sneak up on you, don't they? But how little we know. Hey, how little we know, and how much people still don't know about our history, just at a really basic level. And if we're going to have a future that honours te tiriti o Waitangi, if we're going to have a future where everyone is able to be who they are and our tangata whenua are honoured and Tino Rangatiratanga is present, we have to know about the story. And so if we don't know about the story, how can we have an informed conversation about it, So that's me, that's what I'm passionate about, and hamutu, kia ora.
Nei rā, taku mihi ki te mana whenua o te rohe nei. Arā kia ngā tikahu nunu tēnā koutou. Ki ngā hapu, ki ngā iwi o ngā motu nei tēnā hoki koutou. Kāti ki ngā tāngata whenua huri noa i te ao, mai i te awa, ki te moana, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. No haina me ina pō o Putifuna, ko Kirsty Fong tōku ingoa. Rang我自我介绍一下我的家族是客家人。当我们移民各个国家时，我们始终是客人。我在新西兰也是客人，谢谢。我的名字是方丽蓉。Hello. It's so nice to see you all here on a very chilly Thursday evening here in Ahuriri, Napier. I just came here this afternoon and I had a really good dinner. At Origami. It's not a plug, but I just wanted you to know. If you were looking for a restaurant to go to, that's a really good one. I introduced myself in Mandarin, but on my mum's side of the family, they're from Shanghai in China, and they migrated down to Singapore to escape the Japanese occupation. On my dad's side of the family, they're from Guangzhou in the south of China, and they migrated down to Tamaki in Auckland, Camille specifically, if anyone knows, where Sylvia Park Mall is, to work as market gardeners in the late 1800s. I was born in Singapore and I moved here when I was about 6 years old. Since 2016, I've been working as a Tiriti facilitator and a co-founder and member of Asian Supporting Tino Rangatiratanga, which is a group of Asians, a group of racialised migrants who stand in solidarity with the mana motu Hawke and Tino Rangatiratanga of iwi, Māori, and Hawke. And that has taken many different forms, but it started first in solidarity, and then now it has expanded to political education with our own communities, translating summaries of Tiriti into different languages, bringing that out to our different communities. I have the privilege of helping train and facilitate community facilitators in their own languages to go out to their own communities, because there is such a hunger there where lots of people are saying, okay, we've found ourselves in this land. What does that mean for us? How do we find belonging? We hear that it's a bicultural framework, but I'm from Syria, I'm from Korea, I'm from all of these different places. We also have our own experiences of dispossession, of colonization, of imperialism, and so what does that mean? Perhaps it is because of those things that we are displaced, that we have found ourselves here. And now we also find ourselves complicit in dishonouring the treaty, because we have come here in a crown immigration system that was unconsented to by Māori. I introduced myself in Mandarin, saying that my peoples are Haka peoples, or Kirzia people. They are internally displaced Northern Han Chinese who, over generations, who fled to the south of China, so Cantonese-speaking areas in China. And they were given the name Haka, which literally translates to guest families, the guests of the Cantonese people. And so I find that really fitting, and this is how I position myself here also in Aotearoa as a guest, as manuhiri, because Te Tiriti was an invitation. But to be a guest in a guest-host relationship, that is a reciprocal relationship. It's an honour, but it's also a responsibility.
Perfect.
Wow, we've got quite the lineup, I'm sure you'll all agree. So next up the rank is Gwyn's going to run us through our little pop quiz. And it's okay if you don't get 100%.
Can't wait. Awesome. Just a little bit of fun to start out with. One of the, as I said in the intro, one of the things that I'm really still astounded at is how little information we actually have. So how many people here who went to school in Aotearoa got a really good, solid understanding of our history as they went through school? Okay. Wow, one or two. Okay, so since since having left school, how many people have found that they've had a huge amount of ability to access really good, solid information? They've got a really good understanding of our history and Te Tiriti Waitangi. Yeah. So this is one of the things that we find, is that we have very little information and understanding, and many of us are quite ignorant about things. And the other thing that we find is that a lot of people have picked up stuff kind of unconsciously as we've gone through life, through the kind of the discourse that comes through the media and the kind of the messages that come through. And a lot of that information is actually not accurate, it's not true, it's outright lies, or it's just twisting of the truth. So one of the big things that's really important for us to do is actually start to just check our own information, Just check that what we've got in our brains there, that we've picked up over the years, just check that it's actually accurate. Because if it's not, we kind of need to find out what's actually going on, So this is a little quick true-false quiz. I'm not going to make you show your hands or anything like that, but it's just a little opportunity. These are some of the things that we often find people have a little bit of misinformation about. So these are just a little bit of an exercise on just checking some of that information out. So here we go. You ready? Okay, number one. Abel Tasman discovered Aotearoa, New Zealand in 1642. True or false? False. Awesome. We were told that at school, neglected to mention that people have been living here for hundreds and hundreds of years. Yeah. Okay, number 2. Rangatira Māori were complaining to the British Crown and the Governor of Australia about the behaviour of British and other newcomers in Aotearoa in the early 1800s. True or false?
True.
True, yeah. What was the nickname of Kurorareka?
Hellhole of the Pacific.
Hellhole of the Pacific. Yeah, excellent. Okay, number 3. He whakaputanga o te Rangatiratanga o New Tiriti was signed in 1835 and recognised by existing global powers. True, false? I have absolutely no idea what you're talking about.
True.
True. Awesome, awesome. He whakaputanga. How many people know about the Declaration of Independence? Oh, quite a well-educated audience. Nice. So that's one of our best-kept secrets. So many people do not know that there's a Declaration of Independence here. We know about Declaration of Independence in America, signed on the... What day was the Declaration of Independence? He whakaputanga o te Rangatiratanga o New Tiriti signed? 28th of October. Nice. Awesome, awesome. Halfway. Alrighty. Number 4. Māori ceded sovereignty to the British Crown in 1840? False. Awesome. Number 5. Over 500 rangatira and Hobson signed the Treaty of Waitangi.
Hey.
Wow, you guys are onto it. They signed Te Tiriti of Waitangi. So it was a little bit of a trick question, just to check you on your toes. Okay, by 1840 the settler population outnumbered tangata whenua population. False. Yeah, how many people roundabout were here in 1840?
2,000.
Newcomers? About 2,000, yeah. So about 2-3% of the population. So who was in control? Māori. What language was spoken? Who had all the produce and all the trade and all the land? Māori land, yeah. Okay, number 7. Colonisation stopped in 1880. Yeah. You have no idea how many people say, but that was a long time ago. Colonisation started and continued and continues all the way through. Has been continuing all the way through. Halfway. The last one, number 8, the Waitangi Tribunal recommendations are binding to the government. False. Yeah. Halfway. Hey, you guys are really onto it. And actually, clap yourselves on the back because most of the time when we do this, a lot of people don't know these answers. And if anyone kind of had a little bit of a double take or there's new information there or didn't get the same answers as others in this is an invitation to go, oh, okay, wonder where that bit of information came from. Let's just check out that we've got an accurate and shared, clear understanding of the history of Aotearoa. Halfway.
Kia ora. Well done, guys. I'm impressed. Right, so from here we're going to launch into the discussion proper. I'm going to try and just make it be organic and see how it flows, and I'll try and rein you guys in if you start talking too long. I'm sure you'll be on your best
It'll be me.
Hey, so we're going to kick off, sort of start right back at the beginning, and Martin, as soon as it was your ancestor that drafted Te Tiriti, I wonder if you can kick us off around what was agreed in Te Tiriti or Waitangi?
You know, if that was easily answered, we wouldn't have a 800-page book about it, but I'll do my best, and I think there's a really fantastic level of understanding about this here tonight. But in the essence, the bargain was this. Let's start with the words used. So-called English version, later constructed, sovereignty is ceded to the Crown under that version, but it was the sovereignty possessed collectively or individually by the chiefs of the day, and I'll come back to that. Whereas under Te Tiriti, the document actually signed, what is surrendered is something different, kawanatanga or governance. Back to the English version, what is retained, in other words kept, the other side of the bargain by Māori, is the full, exclusive and undisturbed possession of lands, forests, estates and fisheries. However, under Te Tiriti, something much deeper, broader and more profound and complex is retained, is guaranteed. Tino Rangatiratanga. And in Henry's words, as he explained in 1847 to Bishop Selwyn, their full rights as chiefs. Now, it's partly because of these differences in meaning, sovereignty, kawanatanga, property rights, Rangatiratanga, that we have the treaty principles. and they are deeply embedded in the document itself. They were derived from the Waitangi Tribunal from 75 on, and developed by or established by some of the greatest judicial minds in our country. Quite unlike the revisionist set of principles, I might add, that are being promoted by the ACT Party at the moment, that have got no resemblance to the document itself, but we could come back to that. But if you go down to the document, I've been really assisted by Ned Fletcher's book in terms of trying to reconcile the two versions so that I can answer the question, and I'll do it as briefly as I can. And it does anchor in he whakaputanga, and that is critically important, because under that instrument, James Busby in 1835, bless him, he encouraged this hui of the rangatira of the day, and they conferred to the collective of chiefs the right of a sovereign and the legislative capacity to make laws for peace and good order, international trade, that sort of thing. And the word used in that document is he tahi kawanatanga. And in effect, what Dr. Fletcher posits is that the sovereignty ceded to the Crown in the English version of the treaty was that legislative capacity, that right of governance to make laws for those limited purposes that was vested in the collective of chiefs under he whakaputanga. Nothing more and nothing less. Conversely, what was retained was Tino Rangatiratanga. And that is the full rights of chiefs within their rohi, within their hapu. And so you have what Dr. Fletcher posits is a kind of federation model. If you think of Australia, you've got state jurisdiction over a whole bunch of things, and you've got the federal jurisdiction sitting over the top for issues in common. And so at one level of this arrangement, under the form of sovereignty, kawanatanga, that was ceded to the Crown has the ability to basically keep the peace from all these unruly Pākehā that are raving around Kororaraka, doing terrible things, but also to regulate international affairs, trade, and interactions between Māori and Pākehā. That was what was handed over to the Queen of the day, the Crown, a very limited form of governance or sovereignty that was previously ceded to the collective of chiefs under he whakaputanga. But within each nation, within each rohi, within each hapu, exclusive domain was retained. And so to the kaupapa of this hui, and I think looking to the future, and this is really what I want to talk about today, my model is one of self-determination. And that if we look at a way of honouring that bargain in contemporary times, it is a model whereby Māori retain the right to make decision for Māori, and across much of state functioning, health and welfare and education and what have you. And can I just finish by explaining that I see that this is the essence of the bargain. It is less about drawing lines on a map or about power, as you might think for a federation model. It's about creating space in people's lives. For Māori in particular, to exercise their mana and tikanga in the way they live, their relationships with each other, and with society generally. And I'm going to return to that when we talk about Matiki Mai. But in essence, that was the agreement. A model of self-determination for Māori, and within that, a place to stand for Pākehā as tangata tiriti.
Gwyn, do you want to break that down for us now?
I'm quite simple, that sounded really complicated. so I'm kind of quite simple, and I guess for me the thing about what Te Tiriti said was, if you look at the context on the day, right? What was happening on the day, look at the he whakaputanga. He whakaputanga says that the sovereignty and the authority of the rangatira, of the hapu, of this land is present, has been being exercised for hundreds and hundreds of years. That is the reality. All of the rest of the world needs to understand that. You can't come in here, and no one's allowed to exercise any other kawanatanga unless you give us, unless we get permission from the rangatira, from that confederation, from all of the rangatira of the hapu. So for me, this is the basis of it, right? The rangatira of the hapu are sovereign, independent, have total absolute authority over everything. No one else is allowed to do any other kawanatanga unless it's done under their authority, in relationship with them, with their permission, and in a limited way, and honouring that rangatiratanga. So when we get to Te Tiriti, if, like you say, Martin, this riffraff is going to be controlled in any way, shape or form by a kawana, a governor, then they had to ask permission to exercise any authority. Hence, okay, can we please exercise authority over these settlers that you've been asking us to control since 1805 and all the ones that are going to come? So that was what was given, the permission to do what we've been asking you to do for a long, long time and have some limited authority over the newcomers, that's us. And Article 2 says, and we affirm the Tino Rangatiratanga, the absolute total sovereignty and authority that we have recognised in He Whakaputanga, that will be affirmed, protected, and continue to have absolute control over all of these lands, as has been exercised for hundreds of years. And then, you know, Article 3 says, oh, by the way, and anything that you guys set up in your kawanatanga, we want equal rights, thank you. Same rights as British citizens and subjects. And then we have this amazing, for the time, recognition of religious freedom and protection of Māori customary practice. So that's a kind of like a simplified of it, because like for me it's about He Whakaputanga, what does that say? And then building on that, how does Te Tiriti give us that understanding of the next step?
But that's what I said.
Yeah, but you said it real complicated.
I was trying to...
That was too confusing. And Ned's great, but Ned's just saying what has already been said,
Yeah.
technically, is like, oh, actually there is no difference because that's all they wanted, which is useful, but still the reality is Te Tiriti said what it said, right?
Well, just to respond to that, Gwyn, the key point is that the Crown has assumed and Pākehā have assumed that this thing called sovereignty that was ceded is some absolutely untrammelled right of power to make whatever the heck laws you like, including this Treaty Principles Bill that we've got in the wings now, including the hundreds of pieces of legislation that absolutely swept away Māori rights right from the 1840s right through to 1975 and is now creeping back into vogue. And my point is, you can read that word sovereignty on the face of the English version, but you actually need to be a bit more thoughtful and understand all of that history that you're talking about to unpack the context in which that word sovereignty was used and why Henry used kawanatanga in its place in the document that was actually signed. And that isn't straightforward. If it were easy, we would not be having this conversation now, 200 years later nearly, to try and figure it out.
Except that it wasn't the English text that was signed on the, except that it wasn't the English text that was signed on the day, it wasn't even there.
Completely
So
agree.
it wasn't sovereignty that was ceded, it was kawanatanga.
No
So
argument.
that argument doesn't come till later on, till we have this English text that gets put through, and those of us who didn't understand what was said in the Te Reo text thought that that was the same. But that's, so it's, I think that sometimes we lose in that translation, that it was kawanatanga, the conversations were about kawanatanga and Tino Rangatiratanga and the relationship between those two things. And that was well understood by tangata whenua. So I think we've got to keep going back to that, because that's the language that was used. That was the language that was discussed, debated all day and probably most of the night. That was what was signed over, was kawanatanga and its relationship to Tino Rangatiratanga.
Kia ora.
Agreed.
And I think we've got a pretty well-informed audience here, but Kirsty, do you just want to speak to, kind of just briefly, in a nutshell, how well did that agreement get lived up to?
How are we doing? How are we doing with kawanatanga?
It's almost...
Just,
yeah. Okay. So, we've covered off sort of very briefly what's happened. Now we'd like to move the conversation on to sort of where we're at. So let's start really, really broadly. Can I please get a show of hands? Who feels like our current democratic system is working well for us? Who's generally happy with our central and local government, take our views, distribute taxes and make views on our behalf? Anyone happy? We've got a handful. Okay. That's good basis for this. So Gwyn, can you start us off with can you give us a feel of what your perspective is of how many people in this country actually understand our history? I think you sort of touched on it, but yeah, and why it's important that we understand.
So why is it important that we know our history?
Yeah, and like roughly, what's your take on it? How much of us actually understand our history? You've kind of covered it, but...
Yeah. If we don't understand how we got to where we are, it's really difficult to have a conversation. And even, in our conversation, when we don't have a clear and shared understanding of the history, it's really difficult to find a way forwards. And understanding all of the influences that impacted on that process of colonisation that are still functioning. Because, as we said in the quiz, colonisation didn't end way back in the 1800s. We're still constantly experiencing those processes and those worldviews and those perspectives that influenced back then and still influence now. So those ideas of cultural superiority, those ideas of what ways are good and right and best, and who should be in charge and who should make the rules and how we should make the rules, those systems and structures that were set up based on a set of ideas and beliefs that are still embedded in those systems and structures. So they continue to impact on everyday life, and they continue to privilege those of us who are part of the settler population, and they continue to discriminate against all others, because that's what they were set up to do, right? If you look at a picture of the 1860s settler government, probably most of you in the room wouldn't feel very represented. But those are the systems and structures that were introduced here, and those are the same systems and structures that continue to perpetuate that same injustice and create those same inequities.
So I suppose the treaty's become a bit of a political football recently. Can we have a discussion around what the principles of the treaty are? And there's some people saying things like the treaty was rewritten in the 1980s. Is that misinformation or... Yeah, can we have a bit of an explain around that? Kirsty, do you want to take that one?
I've got them all written down here somewhere, but look, I touched on it earlier. Rather than referring to the treaty directly, the legislation starting with the Treaty of Waitangi Act and the Resource Management Act and the Local Government Act and a whole range of legislation refers to the principles of the treaty that the tribunal divined really through the claimants presenting in front of that tribunal, and then the courts kind of picked that up. But they include principles of making informed decisions, of redress, of active protection. And what they're intended to do is really make the treaty work in contemporary times, and in practical ways and in helpful ways. And I think there's an enormous opportunity within those principles as they stand. They aren't the deal, but they're a reflection of the deal, and I think there's much to actually celebrate in them to the extent that they better empower Māori in the way I described earlier, to exercise their Tino Rangatiratanga through, and essentially, the state in the way it interacts with Māori, respecting that Māori tikanga and giving it a place in education and in health, in all forms of really state interaction. And I guess so far in that regard, you'd have to say, in large measure, both principles and Te Tiriti itself have been honoured in the breach. But they do have great potential, and if they were faithfully reflected rather than now perhaps being stripped out, there's a real opportunity for this nation to thrive. So that's what the principles are intended to do. They're intended to do a job, I think, as part of a journey towards the destination of honouring Te Tiriti itself.
Okay.
I want to talk that honouring part of the journey towards honouring Te Tiriti itself, because we can think about the principles as a way to reconcile the two texts, right? The rightful treaty and then Hobson's draft, or the Crown sheet, whatever you want to call the English document. But we know that we also can't reconcile those two things because there is a fundamental difference between the two. What is that? Come on, you guys know. Yeah. So in the English text, Māori hapu iwi one day just woke up and ceded their sovereignty to a queen that they had never met. So, but in terms of our legislative frameworks and our government structures, it is one way to try reconcile the two. And so we've got lots and lots of different pieces of legislation. I think 193 pieces across a whole bunch of different sectors, saying lots of different things. And then they have to be updated based on different findings. So based on the Te Paparahi o Te Raki claim, which found that Ngāpuhi never ceded sovereignty. Obvious. Now there are new principles of Tino Rangatiratanga and Kāwanatanga. There is one more.
Oritetanga? Tauretetanga?
And so I think it can be really hopeful, but also knowing about, has anyone heard of the international legal concept contra proferendum? I feel like I'm doing a Te Tiriti workshop right now.
Yeah.
Can you tell me about it?
Where a treaty is signed between sovereign nations and is signed in the indigenous language that takes precedence. Matters of law.
Absolutely.
Because it is the language that those people knew and understood at that time.
Yeah, okay. Absolutely correct, the OG. But also that internationally Te Tiriti is recognised, right? That is important to know. And so the Treaty of Waitangi is kind of only practiced here in New Zealand. But yeah, I think right now it is important to get our submissions in for the Treaty Principles Bill, get armoured up if there is going to be a potential referendum. Because now the coalition government and the ACT Party are seeking to redefine the principles, but they are rewriting essentially what Te Tiriti is. And the impacts of it are going to be long-lasting and huge and quite dangerous. Even in the ways in which they have put in Article 1, 2 and 3. They didn't write Principle 1, 2 and 3, they wrote Article 1, 2 and 3, and they say the Crown has all right to govern all New Zealanders. Is that what it said in Article 1? No.
Well, one of the principles picking up on that, Kirsty, is in the proposed bill is, when we see it, I think it's going to say that we've all got Rangatiratanga, all of us.
Oh yeah.
And that's just nuts. That is so divorced from the absolute core essence of the bargain from the Māori perspective. The rangatira, the hapu, collectively, they have Tino Rangatiratanga. That was critically important that they retain that. You can't just sort of spread that around like we've all got it. What we've got through the invitation of the treaty, to use your words, is a place to stand if we respect where Article 2 is intended to leave Māori in the first place. We respect that, we then have a place to stand, and that's what I think being tangata tiriti is all about.
So if we're in that mindset, the tangata tiriti, we want to respect and honour the privilege of what it is, of our being able to be here, what are some things that we need to be considering both sort of individually, but as a nation, if we wanted to honour the treaty, Tiriti, what sort of changes do we need to make in order to honour it? Do you want to lead us off on that one, Kirsty?
I actually wasn't listening to the question.
Could you repeat the question?
Yeah, sure. So what are some things that we need to be considering as a nation if we want to honour the agreement made through Tiriti? What sorts of changes do we need to make in order to honour it?
I think that's for iwi and hapu to decide what the relationships with all of us look like, maybe on a more localised level. But I think as tau iwi, as people of the treaty, is our obligation to honour the treaty, which is our first immigration document. With any contract that you sign, you know what the terms and conditions are, what your rights and responsibilities are inherent, and your duties and obligations. I think business people understand that. I think when we sign, any contract with our landlord, we understand that. So I don't think that honouring Te Tiriti should be any different. Also, I think going back to our last conversation, going to honour Te Tiriti is just looking at the 4 articles, the preamble and the 4 articles, right? We don't need all of those principles, actually. It kind of feels like they're complicating something because they don't want to look at the actual truth of the matter itself. And so if we can just pare it back and say it's not complicated to honour an agreement that benefits us, that calls for us to be here in relationships of mutual benefit and interdependence, that is a really aspirational document. It's a really innovative and welcoming one. And I think that we would be all the better for it, because I don't know about you, but I don't know if our current system of governance and structure benefits all of us. We've got huge inequalities, we've got huge inequities. We've got people sleeping on the streets. I just walked by someone just before. That is so unfair and it's so unequal. And we need another system of governance for all of us to thrive, for all of us to have our integrity, for all of us to look after Papatūānuku as she does us. In a time of huge ecological collapse, I feel like, currently it is extremely urgent. We need lots of different changes right now.
I made it big and complicated before, but fundamentally it's about relationships. And I think that's what the Tiriti was all about, was relationships. And as I said before, to me, honouring the Tiriti is about that self-determination for Māori on the one hand, where within people's daily lives, within their homes, within their workplaces, within the education system, within the health system, within the criminal justice system, Māori have a space in which to assert and exercise Rangatiratanga and their own tikanga, to be Māori, to not be colonised in these day-to-day ways. And so, if you think about the abject failure, I guess, of state intervention in just about everything under a one-size-fits-all, this notion that we are all one people. Well, who is this one people and what do they look like? Based on a sort of English or Pākehā conception, it's demonstrably failed in terms of relative incarceration rates in our prisons, in terms of relative unemployment rates, in terms of reduced lifespan, inferior health statistics, and through a sequence of what I call colonisation, urbanisation, and then the reforms of the 1980s, you've created these urban wastelands which have enabled the gangs to thrive. And so this all brings a huge cost to society. And I only wish the ACT Party could actually figure that out, because we all stand to gain. If we honour Te Tiriti through empowering Māori through self-determination and trusting them through that relationship, if we'd only just let it go, there's nothing to fear here, except perhaps our own prejudice. That's what I think is honouring Te Tiriti. It's a very personal thing. It can start with how you interact with the person next to you, right through to that federation model that I talked about. But it's about creating space, and if we create that space for Māori to be Māori, then we have a place ourselves to be here. And I'd like to finish this little bit of a ramble with a quote from Mātiki Mai, which talks about the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People and Te Tiriti, and it says all of these are underpinned by the understanding of what is right, as you said before, Kirsty, in terms of our relationship with the environment, relationships between people, and the whole discourse, this is Mātiki Mai, is about a longing for people to be free, to govern themselves and to relate to each other in a way that is right and just. And it says this: when Te Tiriti offered kawanatanga to the Crown, it was predicated on the immediate and pressing need for some authority to be exercised over the unruly Pākehā who are arriving here in the north. But it was also predicated on the belief that just as each iwi and hapu was free to exercise its own authority, provided it did not impinge upon the territory or rights of others, so Pākehā could be free to do the same. That remarkable offer was the very basis of the hoped-for treaty relationship, a place to stand for all of us. That's what honouring Te Tiriti is about. We legitimately reclaim our right to stand here as Pākehā, as tangata Te Tiriti, when we honour Te Tiriti.
Soon as Mātiki Mai has been brought up, Gwyn or Kirsty, would you just sort of give us a quick explainer of what Mātiki Mai is and how relevant it is today and what it could be for the future?
Who's heard of Mātiki Mai? Awesome. All right, so Mātiki Mai was commissioned by the Iwi Chairs Working Group in 2010, and Dr. Moana Jackson and Professor Margaret Mutsu, they led 252 hui all up and down the country, asking hapu, iwi, whānau groups, marae, whoever wanted them, and lots of people wanted them, and asked if you could live your life as you choose tomorrow, what values would that be based on? That is essentially what a constitution is. A constitution can sound really big, like super legal and stuff, but Margaret Mutsu essentially defines it as simply a set of rules that we agree to abide by. And I think we practice this every day, right? And so they synthesized all of their findings. Oh, also Veronica Tawhai, she led, I think, about 60 rangatahi hui all up and down the country too. And it is a document of dreams and imagination, pregnant with hope and of shared values. And it is upon shared values, I think, that we can seek a better future, a rebalance, a restoration, or as Dr. Moana Jackson says, an ethic of, oh my gosh, I forgot it. He says something really profound that
Yes, he always does.
it will come back to me. I'm so sorry. But essentially, it's an invitation for all of us, for tau iwi, to imagine what kind of lives we want to live in relation to each other. Because I often think that migration is one of the biggest and bravest and most courageous acts of hope that we can ever make, right? I think we all have different stories. Maybe your family came here 2 months ago, or they've been here since before the signing of Te Tiriti, but there was probably a reason that people took such a life-changing journey. Under duress, maybe, or fantasies, I'm not sure, but that is what constitutional transformation is too. We're saying that we need to acknowledge he whakapūtanga on its tiriti, as well as other documents such as the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, towards a future vision based on shared values between you and me, and one where one where Māori, hapu, iwi have their rightful tino Rangatiratanga and mana motu hake, their sovereignty and their self-determination restored, right? Because our liberation is entangled, and so we're not free, truly, if Māori aren't. And I think, that's... Read the report. Read the report, it's really beautiful. It's mostly quotes from people all up and down the country. When I say report, you probably are like, oh, it's really boring and hard to read. But this one is really joyous and easy to read, so highly recommend.
And I love the concept you brought out there about a values-based government structure, and that sounds great. But to sort of bring it home for us, what sort of, can you guys give us an idea of a value that might be put in as part of that, and maybe one that resonates with you, and how an idea of these values could be practically applied to either our current or future government societal structures?
One of the things I really love that is a Moana Jackson quote out of the Matikumai report is one of the ways that he articulates the exercising of mana in a... Oh. Hello. He talks about the exercising of mana in a leadership context. And he talks about it as a taonga, a gift, handed down to the living to be exercised on behalf of the mokopuna, the grandchildren. So if we think about constitution, it can sound really, really complicated. But if we think about it in terms of a constitutional value like that our leaders have been given a gift from Te Puna, handed down over generations, to be exercised for that period of time, not for their benefit, not for their children's benefit, but for their grandchildren's benefit and all of those to come. If we think about that as something that we need to be having embedded at a constitutional level that would change the way that leaders made decisions, that's pretty cool, right? That's pretty cool. And it's really simple, actually.
Mic drop.
Yeah, some of the values we've got, things like balance, conciliation, community. How do you think we might be able to build some of that in? Any ideas at this point, or idea of how it could look for ideas into the future? Very tricky question.
I don't know if it's tricky, it's just, I think we've got a lot to say.
Right.
I don't know, if I have to choose one, maybe I'll choose belonging. Because often when I do workshops with racialised migrants, which is most weeks, people always say, how do we belong? And I think several years ago, I was like, maybe you don't actually. Find it for yourself. But I think it is such a fundamental human desire, and it's such a fundamental human need to feel, belonging somewhere, to be valued, to be part of something. And so instead of, I think, finding belonging in an ongoing colonising settler state, I think we can find belonging with each other, shoulder to shoulder in struggle, where we say, actually, things need to change. We are here together. We actually seek belonging and constitutional transformation. And with our shared dreams, with the potency of our imaginations and our hope for something better for our grandchildren and for us, this is where I find belonging, I think.
Yeah, look, I'm a lawyer and a councillor, so values isn't my strength. But self-deprecation aside, I have talked about self-determination a lot, and I think that's at the heart of this. I've also talked about relationships, but one of the great journeys I've been on, in fact since that law school experience, is unpacking and getting to know, through the enormous generosity of tangata whenua, tikanga Māori. And the values in that system are just profound. And even all of the kupu, you know, words like iwi don't just mean bones, you know, utu doesn't mean revenge. It's such layered, rich, door-opening, mind-opening experience to unpack the language in the tikanga. Justice Joe Williams, he defined the essence of the Māori legal system in 3 words, and they are mana, whanaungatanga and utu. In the Pākehā world and the Western tradition, it's all about rights. As you said before, what about responsibilities? And in tikanga, any rights always come with responsibilities. The authority of the rangatira has that responsibility back to the tipuna and through to the mokapuna. The kaitiaki-tanga of the environment. You are kaitiaki again for those behind you and for those in front of you and for the relationship, for the benefit of the environment. It's not about you, actually. And I think the values, all the values we probably need to frame a constitution around, or a treaty relationship around, are inherent within tikanga Māori. If we took the opportunity alongside our history to get to understand that, we'd understand our place in this world. And it'll be something, in fact, not just domestically but internationally, could absolutely be transformational. So I totally encourage people, and it sounds like a lot of you are already on this journey, learn about that. It's a wonderful revelation.
Looking ahead to 2040, which is the bicentennial of Te Tiriti, what's your vision for New Zealand's constitutional and societal landscape? How do you see the relationship between Māori and Crown evolving?
Have you got any easy questions? No.
Before. Do we have a vision we could paint for the audience, or a way of getting there?
A vision or a way of getting there? I think, you know, just building on what Kirsty's saying, I think the first step is that we need to be listening to tangata whenua.
Yeah.
This is Māori land. Māori have been here for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, and even those of us who have, you know, have several generations of being here, haven't been here as long as tangata whenua. So this is Māori land, and inherent in this whenua, inherent, like Martin said, inherent within Te Ao Māori, I'm going to say all of the answers that we need to solve all of the major problems that we have right now. And we need to be listening to tangata whenua, who have been saying the same thing since the beginning of contact. Listen, 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 listen. And we need to start listening. So the conversations that we have about where we need to go need to be led by tangata whenua. And we need to be listening. We can't decide how Tino Rangatiratanga might look. We can't decide how we should be living in a kawanatanga space on our own. We need to be doing it in relationship. We need to be listening. We need to be actually letting the lead be taken by the people of this land. So that all of the systems and structures, I think our generation, we like the idea of reforming our existing structures, reforming our existing systems, but I actually think we're beyond that. I think the systems and structures that we have are so broken that we can't tweak them into being better. We actually need to be really brave and really imaginative and really make some big changes. Because most of the stuff that we go, oh, but that's never going to change, actually can change. Most of it's not like gravity or other, physics laws that can't be changed. Most of it is about political will. It's about decisions. It's about priorities. It's about where decisions, where resources are put, who makes the calls, who decides what the outcomes are. So most of these things need to be changed. I think, I'm really stoked and really encouraged by the generations that are to come, and particularly our kohanga reo generations, as we're calling them, of these young people who are just think a totally different way. And I think if we can listen to that, not be afraid of change. The Westminster system isn't working that well. If you watch the way our politicians behave in Parliament, like really seriously, we wouldn't let our children behave like that. This is not the only way that our leaders can lead and make decisions, right? That oppositional approach, we call it, the government and the opposition, whose job is to oppose. That's going to create a particular outcome, right? So I think we've got to start getting really brave and start looking at a whole different way of doing things. And even though there are give me an example of that around the world. Doesn't matter if there's no other example. Let's be the ones who do it. Let's be brave. Let's actually really look at big, huge systemic changes and listen to the leadership of tangata whenua, because I really seriously agree with Martin. The answers are there. The answers are in this whenua, have been in this whenua for hundreds of years. And if we listen,
I keep forgetting about what I need to say.
Oh, well, do you want to go? Or?
Yeah, I'll go. Just two things. Number one, the system that we currently live in or are subsumed under isn't that long. It hasn't been in operation for that long, which means that it's also actually really quite easy to change it, because we haven't been living like this for eternity. And I think we've got enough evidence to show that perhaps we need to pivot and find something different. And also, secondly, I think when we talk about these things, it can seem so far off and so big, right? Really overwhelming. How do we change an entire structure, entire society, entire systems? How do we maybe recuperate some of the things that we've lost? How do we claw back power or resources? How do we restore hurts? Really devastating, tragic losses and hurts and betrayals of history, but also knowing that we do it as there are little microcosms in our society day by day. We practice interdependence with each other, right? Also, there are lots of different organisations around the country who are working in an honourable tiriti way in terms of, devolved power and devolved responsibility. And so I think lots of people are doing it now. It's not in the future, it is right now. And so I think if we make that collective, if we all do it in our different sectors, in our communities, in our workplaces, the ways that we relate to each other, and even the things that we vote for with our dollar, for example. There are so many different ways of bringing that into the reality, which is right now. I think that's it.
Goodness, 20 past 8, give me till 10 o'clock. I'll see how, I'll see what I can do. Can I just say a couple of things to kick off with? Another kupu I didn't use before was manaakitanga, which actually hangs off mana. And, the incredible generosity of Māori that continues to this day after everything that has been done. It is extraordinary that we're still being invited to participate, really. And we're still being offered the real, and we're still being offered a way forward. And we really need to acknowledge that. So yeah, let it go. At the end of the day, it's a big thing, but it starts with a whole lot of baby steps. And in our daily lives through to our institutions. I wanted to talk about one of those examples, picking up on something that Gwyn said about not trying to wrap this around a Westminster or a Pākehā system. Take co-governance. That's a great way to get Māori a seat at the table and is a proxy for Tino Rangatiratanga in some respects. But you're essentially trying to bend tikanga around a Western system. And where it stumbles or where it struggles is that a lot of the Māori who are at this table are incredibly stretched in their daily lives, right? The same people that are in Hawke's Bay elected to our regional planning committee or to the Māori seats, they are chair of the Marae Committee, all right? They are on the board of the post-settlement governance entity. They're on the Tai Whenua, they're coaching the sports team. They're so integrated, they are tapped out. And so that's why I say we trend towards self-determination and finding all of the places within society, within health, within education. The Kohanga movement is an example of that. And actually the Māori Health Authority could have been an example of that, where we actually let Māori make decisions by them, in their way, for them, that they recognise, that they value, that they get value from. And so we just need to not sort of open every door in every part of our day-to-day lives, from within our houses through to in our state institutions, and see it as a journey, as a quest towards 2040 and beyond. And I think that's how we ultimately transform to the place we're called to become.
Brilliant. So, So obviously there's a lot of issues going on at the moment, and that are important both at a national and a local level. Of direct relevance to Hawke's Bay today is the discussion on Māori wards. So I'd like to call to the stage my colleague, Councillor Maxine Bogue, and she's going to give us a bit of a 101 about what's going on, because even as councillors who have had that many legal briefings on it, it's quite hard to get our head around. So over to you.
Māori wards, that's a current issue that I just want to give you some information about, because it's an opportunity to take action at the local level. And I'm mostly speaking to people from Aucklander and Napier at the moment. So the government's brought in a bill that requires all councils that created Māori wards since 2021, they have to hold a referendum or a poll in the 2025 local body elections about whether to keep them. The results of this poll will be binding and will come into force in 2028. Or, what they're saying is councils could instead choose to rescind their decision to have wards now, so there will be no poll and no Māori wards in 2025. Napier City Council is currently waiting to see what the final legislation will look like. It's in the House now, but if it goes through as it stands, then at the next election in October next year, Hastings and Hastings also Regional Council, who already have Māori wards, will have to include a referendum about whether they want to keep them or not. The Napier and Central Hawke's Bay, who decided that we will have Māori wards, but they're not in place at the moment, we too will have to hold a referendum. But it's a bit more complicated because right now we're partway through a representation review to enable us to have a system, a ward system that will accommodate Māori wards in 2025, enable us to have that. So you may or may not have noticed that we're currently asking people to give us their feedback on where ward boundaries should sit, and based on the decision we made 2 years ago, those will include 2 Māori wards at large. However, if the bill on Māori wards goes ahead as written, Napier City Council will have to make a decision in August this year, next month, about whether we want to rescind, take back our decision to have Māori wards. And prior to that, we have to consult on that decision. We have a very short time frame to do that. Because it's something we are going to be consulting on, I cannot express my personal opinion at this moment. So if council decides to rescind, there will be no referendum in next year's local body elections and no Māori wards in Napier. If we choose to stick to the decision which we made in 2021, we decided in 2021 we would have Māori wards in 2025. It was based on extensive consultation and engagement at the time. Then if we choose to stick with that decision, then along our council definitely wants to stick with the decision we made 3 years ago after extensive local consultation to introduce Māori wards, but we need to go back what you are people think about it. If there's widespread negative feedback in August, the council may decide to rescind our decision and ditch Māori wards in 2025. So this is a call to action for Napier people. Please have your say. Firstly, the consultation we're doing now on our ward boundaries, have a look at our website. If you don't like it, what could we tweak? Secondly, and more relevant to this discussion, if the bill on Māori wards goes through, please give us your feedback. It will be a separate consultation in August on whether we should rescind or stick to our decision to have Māori wards. So please keep an eye out on the council website or social media and see whether and when this is being called for. Now I can't tell you what to say, but please see this as an opportunity for becoming active in honouring Te Tiriti Tiriti here in Napier. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou koutou.
Thanks, Maxine. So we're going to break in a moment, but I just thought I'd give the panel a chance to just respond to that. So we can't share our views because we need to listen to the whole community, but these guys can share theirs. So over to you guys.
Do something! Goodness gracious me, I can't believe we're having this conversation about whether or not Māori should be at the table. Māori should be at the table. It should be a Māori table. That we're even having a conversation about this is insane. I just like to keep it simple, you know, right? So, and we've got to do that. I'm probably preaching to the converted here because probably this is the demographic that does do submissions. So please do and make your friends do submissions, but we've got to take action. We cannot sit and let this stuff happen. Māori need to be at every table, at every decision-making table, at every level in this country. It's Māori, but this is Māori land, yeah? So that's at a really, really basic level. And this idea of, you know, we get hearing this big thing about democracy, and we're going to have a vote on it. Yeah, I hear some chuckles. The second biggest myth in our world is that we're actually doing democracy, right? So we've got to get past this idea of simple majority ruling, because that is not the way to have the voice of the people represented. That is not the way to make decisions. If it's just 51% of it says yes, that means 49% says no, which I'm not very good at maths, but that's not a lot of difference, right? So we've really got to push back against all these ridiculous things that are being enacted. So I'm going to say, make sure that the councillors get the information that they need to be able to do what they need to do, so that we can actually keep pushing through, because Māori ward is the minimum. Co-governance, a seat at the table is the minimum. It's an absolute minimum. It should be a Māori table. It should be a Māori voice that we, as Hobson was invited to have a seat at that table. Let's be honouring to that and have a seat at the table that we were invited to be, and be the people, as Mitzi Nen, one of our elders in Pākehā through the education space, said, be the tau, be the Pākehā that Māori wanted to have a relationship with, that invited into their space, and be honourable to that as guests in this land.
Do you want it? Yep.
Well, I think Gwyn has said it pretty well, but I think also exercising our privileges and our positionality. There are lots of Pākehā here in the room, and there's no better day to be Pākehā in a democracy because your voice gets really listened to. Right? And so, yes, we need to amplify Māori voices, and we can do so with the power that we have, with the relative privilege that we have, with the resources that we have. Sure. And I think this is the work of us today.
Kia ora.
Maybe it's reparation.
Do you want it?
Look, I almost don't even want to talk about this. This is just so infuriating. It's the absolute last thing we need in Hawke's Bay right now. We've got our job, our total focus. Think about Wairoa 2 weeks ago. There was nothing, but we're trying to respond to Cyclone Gabriel. the very vanguard of that response, right from the get-go, was Māori. Right? We're Pukehiwi with Māori at the moment. We're good. We're actually getting the relationship working. And it's not just a seat at the table, it is the table in some instances that is required here. We're making it work. We're going to be thrown to the wolves next year in the middle of all of this recovery, having to campaign around what is going to be a highly divisive issue. It's completely unnecessary, and it's just such a retrograde step. And that'll be fun. So I think we'll probably leave it there.
Perfect timing.
And,
It's time, it's for you.
Yeah. Right.
That's the chair calling, probably. All right.
Yeah. So. Okay, so the first one we got here is the Treaty of Waitangi. Te Tiriti of Waitangi is the only document that Māori signed, but the Treaty of Waitangi draft, put together by Busby and Hobson on the 4th of February 1840, was the Genesis document, without which there would be no Te Tiriti. Surely that also carries weight and rights and interpretation, I suppose. So surely the English version therefore carries weight.
Okay.
This is a law question.
Life according to Ned answer, really, isn't it?
Yeah, well, look, I think I'll finish where I started on that, because the Crown's instructions relayed through Hobson and Busby to Henry were in good faith, and they reflected an emerging view at the time, which was to really transform the way that England interacted with Indigenous people. It was a first of its kind. And so, yes, the English wording, without that English wording that Henry was given, and through those instructions back to James Stephen, back to Normanby, and through, really conceptions from Lord William Wilberforce himself, Te Tiriti reflects, actually, the intent of what the English words say, and they came from a very good place. So yes, that English meaning is important. It was the substrate upon which Te Tiriti was founded, but it wasn't the document that was signed.
Maybe just a very quick. I think the importance needs to be placed on he whakaputanga also, right? He whakaputanga o te Rangatiratanga o New Tirini 5 years before the signing of Te Tiriti, which said, how do you say that word?
Unequivocally.
Yeah, that one.
I know.
And it just reaffirmed Māori rangatira and independence and sovereignty. It was an emergence onto the world stage saying this is who we are, this is who we've always been. It's an enduring fact that we're sovereign and independent. And so a treaty, if I'm correct, constitutional lawyer, it can only be signed between 2 or more sovereign nations. And so it's already there. He whakaputanga, the British powers, other colonial Western powers recognise the sovereignty and independence of New Tirini, and so that has never changed. Hone Sadler, who is a Ngāpuhi Aora, says that Te Tiriti is the younger sibling of He Whakaputanga, right? So I think we can get into the nitty-gritty of the text and the words and the translation, but we also need to think about Te Tiriti and He Whakaputanga in a larger historical context. So at that time, we know about the doctrine of discovery, one that legitimizes by the Vatican through these things called papal bulls, the subjugation and dispossession of peoples who aren't Christian, and it legitimized them to take their land and everything that is important to them. It is important to note that the doctrine of discovery has never been rescinded. It's been repudiated by the Pope, who has said that's really bad, but he has not rescinded it, so it is still active today. And it is the basis of colonisation in many, many different places, including Aotearoa, New Zealand. Yeah, I think. And so I think it's important to realise that these global historical processes of colonisation and dispossession that get, transposed around the place. And so, yes, perhaps the intentions of the translators of the English text may have been really pure. We don't know what they were. Sorry, not to shit on your whanaunga. Yeah, we do. But also in terms of like the global colonial powers and systems that are still at place today, we can only think about Palestine right now, Kanaki, Sudan, Congo, Tibet, Hawaii, West Papua, all of these different places. So it's not actually an isolated matter. We're part of a global struggle against white supremacy and domination and colonial domination.
Feeding into that, how can or will national or international laws respond to the rewriting of Te Tiriti? I.e., is this legal and can it be stopped by law?
Go, Gwyn. Go.
I'm not a constitutional lawyer. In terms of the attempts to rewrite Te Tiriti by the current government, is that what that question is about? How can you rewrite something that was actually agreed upon in 1840? You can't, even if you do create another something, it doesn't undo the agreement that was made, and the commitment that was made, and the relationship that was forged. And intentions, we can't really know everyone's intentions, but the reality is that it's the Te Tiriti waitangi that was discussed, that was signed, and so that, at the end of the day, is we would just got to keep going back to.
Yeah. One for you, Kirsty. You said read the report. I believe this is Mātiki Mai. Can you please tell us what that is and how to find it?
Yeah, Google Mātiki Mai Aotearoa and you'll find it.
Website, nwo.org.nz. You can download it as a PDF.
Yeah, spelling.
M-A-T-I-K-E space M-A-I.
Nice.
Hayley, I've just got to say, we do know what the intentions were of the drafters of the treaty. They were honourable, they were not colonisation, they were the exact opposite of that, and deliberately so. It's been the breach of the thing that's been the problem, not the document, in either version, actually.
Yeah.
But for us to renege on it now, in the way proposed by this government, whether that has repercussions in international law, I do not know. But it would be like standing on a ladder, kicking it out from underneath you and expecting not to come crashing to the floor if we do that. That would be nothing less than a constitutional crisis, the likes of which we haven't seen.
There's a huge gap between what you're saying and what ACT says. How can we bridge that? Can we undo all this?
I think, as an educator, I'm going to say, talk to your friends, talk to your friends, talk to your friends, talk to your family. We just need to make sure that people understand the actual realities of it. While we're still sitting with so much ignorance about what Te Tiriti actually says, what was agreed, what was meant, all of that stuff, then it opens the door for misinformation and disinformation and outright lies, and that's problematic. And we are all responsible to make sure that we do whatever we can to make sure that people understand and know the story, know the history. Otherwise, it just makes us really, really vulnerable.
I think we're at a really hopeful moment. I think there is a general sentiment that this coalition government has done for our society, right? something that governments haven't been able to do recently, which is unite us all, galvanise us all together, actually getting us to interrogate what our relationship is to Te Tiriti and with each other, and knowing that there is a disparity there. Then we see thousands of people all up and down the country in the streets saying Toitu Te Tiriti, right? But also not just Toitu Te Tiriti, Indigenous rights everywhere. We're seeing a growing conscientisation all over the world. The Palestine marches are still going. They're super hearty. I think, when is it? Hastings Clock Tower, Sunday, 2 p.m? 1:30. Every Sunday. And yeah, I lost my train of thought, but I think that's important, where we also hold our power and that hope too, and say, if we are in a democracy, we have a lot of power to change things, and that comes with standing shoulder to shoulder together with each other. So actually, got to thank them a little bit, because there are so many people wanting to learn about Te Tiriti. I don't know about you, but as Te Tiriti facilitators, we are inundated now in a way that we hadn't been for years before, because many people from different walks of life are just saying, I hear it in the news, I don't understand, please keep me captive for 8 hours and tell me all about this document. And they're hungry for it. So I think with that transformation, it only comes through learning an accurate understanding of our history and also how we relate to it. And I think we're getting there. I'm really hopeful.
This one speaks to something I think about quite a lot, and it's about the fear of change. So we speak about self-determination for Māori, but do you think that the greatest fear of tangata Tiriti is that we have to recognise and then divest ourselves of our privilege, power and control, and adequately share resources? Do you think there's a fear around that?
What's that saying? If you take away my privilege, it feels like oppression.
Yeah, right.
And there's a little bit of that that's going on at the moment. There's a sense that people, and often it's the people that are furthest away from ever being affected by any changes, those that have the most power and the most resources, that get the most upset about the possibility that they might lose some of their power and resources. But actually, yeah, when we're sitting in a situation that, we love the idea of a level playing field in this country, eh? We all have the same options, If we all make good choices, then we're going to be able to get there. And I was born to I had a solo parent in a Housing New Zealand home, and look at me, I did well, so therefore, blah, blah, blah. And I think the reality is if we have a really uneven playing field. And if we're at the top of that, we usually don't notice. Privilege is invisible, right? Privilege is invisible to those of us who are privileged. But when you're sitting in a context where you're constantly having to battle uphill, then you're well aware of how uneven the playing field is. And yes, there is going to be a need for some power to change hands. Power changed hands, resources changed hands over 180 years of colonisation as it continues to. And yes, there will be the need for power to be returned and resources to be returned. But actually, how bad will it really be?
Next question. If it came to a vote, and I'm guessing this is Māori wars, correct me if I'm wrong, how do you think the vast number of our immigrants would vote? Tricky question.
You'd have to ask the vast number of immigrant communities.
I'll speak to that.
We're all immigrants.
We're all migrant communities. I think that just goes back to, let's just make sure that people have a clear understanding of the situation. Because all communities are vulnerable. We're all migrants if we're not tangata whenua, to be fair. And we're all different. And everyone will think and feel according to the information that they have and their experience. So it's really important that we have the information. And for communities who are more recently having arrived here, often we hear more recent migrants saying, oh, I feel really bad because I don't understand the history of the country. Well, you're not alone. Most of us who grew up here don't know the history either. So it's about all of us having that understanding, all communities.
Yeah, I'm going to try and tie the last two answers up about not having anything to fear and this. If you understand that you are welcome here, if you respect the Tiriti, and you understand the incredible generosity sitting behind that offer, that is the answer to both questions. There's actually nothing to fear at all, except, as I said before, perhaps your own prejudice. And let it go. In the giving, you're going to get so much back that you don't even know if you just take the time to find out. That's what I would say to anyone coming to this country. And I actually believe from what I hear and what I see, that you, tangata Tiriti, you tauiwi coming to this nation, are more switched on than some of us who've grown up in this nation without any kind of understanding of the history of what happened here before.
The Rangiratanga Māori Wars, which I think I'll just quickly answer. So, if all the consultations completed in 2021, shouldn't we be reminded of what the findings were? And I think there will be a communications package that goes out from Council that gives the story of how we got to our last decision. So that will be happening. And this one I like, rebellion. What would happen to our council what would happen if our council refused to hold a referendum on Māori wars?
Yeah! Woo! Do it!
Who's the rebels?
Yeah.
Well, look, is there any media here? I mean, I have to be careful what I say, but my very first reaction is that they can get stuffed. That was literally my first reaction in my head. Nah, get stuffed. And if every council in New Zealand said, and our local government, New Zealand said to the government, we ain't doing it, what would that then look like? Are they going to put commissioners in across the whole nation? I don't think so. But the fact is, the law of the land is that this is what we're going to have to do, and we as councils ask people to abide by the rules as well. So I have to swallow and unsay what I just said, but that is what I think. And I don't care, Maxine, I'm sharing it, and I will share that next year.
Having said that, the only way things really change is when people break the rules, right? So seriously, abiding by the laws. Slavery would still be happening. Women would still be chattels if people hadn't stood up and fought against injustices. So go hard, I say.
Yeah.
I didn't say anything.
And go obey it.
There probably would be some people in the community who would take us to court, as one of it. And just for a bit of information, both funding those legal costs would be at ratepayer expense, but also the referendum is at ratepayer expense. So the government
Do the
aren't
first
paying
one
for
then.
it for us.
Yeah, may as well pay the court fee.
Yeah.
Hey, that brings us to the close. Do you guys have any final closing comments you'd like to make before we go? Are you happy for the... Oh, he's got his notes.
Can I just read a quote, because you were talking about quotes from Matiki Mai to finish me, and finish perhaps where I'd like this to land. This is what one of the people you were saying was interviewed, because there were all those 61 Wānanga, and the report is full of quotes like this. One old gentleman obviously said this: knowing what our old people had told us, it just seems logical that we would never have ceded anything to the Crown. But the old people also said that we offered Pākehā a place to stand, and that seems logical as well, because it's about manaaki. It's not about them trampling on our manaaki, and it's not us trampling on their right to be here, which Te Tiriti gave them. That was the bargain really, only it's never really worked out that way that the rangatira intended, and probably not the way some Pākehā might have wanted at the time either. And I think it's all right in there.
I think just bringing it back to where we started, and what we've all acknowledged here is the tangata whenua of this land, who have been exercising their Rangatiratanga for many hundreds of years in a whole range of different ways, gave us a really generous invitation to come and participate in this land in a respectful way. And that's a real honour to be able to do that. And even if we've been here for many generations, we are still guests here at the invitation of tangata whenua, and there's a responsibility with that. And it's a huge honour and a privilege to be able to be here at that invitation. So let's be the type of honourable people that deserve and respect that really generous offer and that really generous invitation, and honour the people of this land and the Tino Rangatiratanga of this land.
And let's take collective action now to bring all of those things into our realities, right? So we can hear about the Māori wars, for example, supporting your local council and revolting. Maybe
We're already revolting.
yeah. I mean, frankly, thinking about who you represent, and perhaps that's actually local iwi and hapu, rather than silencing yourselves because of I don't know who else. I think you could be really strong leaders in that, and we will support you. But also getting out on the streets. And I think our young people, especially our grandchildren, are leading the way. So, yeah.
What an honour to be with you guys, thank you.
Right, just a few closing remarks. So first up, to keep up with what's happening and to get links to the videos, all of these talks have been recorded. Go to www.tta.org.nz. A huge shout out to Tangata Tiriti Aotearoa, the local branch who have organised this. This has been a fantastic set of lectures. If you've found this valuable and you want to support future activities, please give a koha as you leave. You'll hear where the buckets are. And please remember to have your say in the representation review. The best way to spread the word is to tell two people who will tell two people who will tell two people. And a special ngā mihi to St Paul's, who have provided the venue, the hospitality and the lovely baking in support of this kaupapa. Thank you. And one final thank you to all of you for coming out on a Thursday night to brave the cold and to come and have this conversation with us. It's so exciting as a local councillor who we often don't get that many people really engaging with our democracy, and not many people come and talk to us. So it's really exciting to see so many people coming to these events and being inspired and active in our democracy. So thank you to all of you.
And thank you, of course, to our wonderful MC tonight, Councillor Hayley. We're going to close this off with a cup of tea here. But yeah, don't forget to come. July 25th is the last lecture in this series. We're going to be at St Napier-based Tiriti Hastings again, where we're going to be getting a youth perspective. We've invited some people younger than me, and it's the most youth adjacent